preparing
This
wonderful,
conference will now be
thank you
recorded.
to Vivian for preparing the wonderful lunch and learn. Today's topic, well, today is Rosh Chodesh. It's the start, actually not the, it's the new moon, it's the start of the, it's actually not the start of the month of Ella, it's tomorrow, but it's the 30th day of Av, and we always count day 30 of a Jewish month as a Rosh Chodesh, whether it's day 30 of the previous month or day 1 of the next month. That's a whole different topic we can maybe discuss sometime. But on Rosh Chodesh, so we have the Musaf Tefillah. Musaf Tefillah is the additional Tefillah. And the reason we have the additional Tefillah, additional prayer, is to correspond to the additional Karbanot, sacrifices that were brought on this day. Just like on Shabbos, we have Musaf, on Yom Tov, on a holiday, we have Musaf because of the additional Karbanot. We have an additional Tefillah prayer that aligns with those additional Karbanot. And we speak about Hashem, bring back, restore the sacrifices. So just as an intro, as an aside, I think most of us are not overly excited and overly spiritualized by the thought of bringing sacrifices, right? It doesn't necessarily resonate with us, right? It's interesting, when I was in Israel, so I met with some friends, and they had gone to the Shomronim. The Shomronim are the remnants of the Karaite community there in Israel. I think the same thing as the Karaites, right? And they on Pesach and Passover, they actually do bring a korban Pesach, and they went and they said it was actually fascinating. So it's interesting. It could be that when we would experience it, we would feel differently about it. I know one of my first summers here as rabbi here, so I went to Baltimore for a 10, 12-day seminar on kashrut seminar. And part of that was going to a Schlachthaus, right, where they slaughter the animals in the proper manner for kosher meat consumption. And my first thought was, I don't know if that's going to be for me, but I'll go. And if it's not for me, I'll just go for a walk, right? But actually, when we were involved in understanding how it's done and what needs to be done and the way that it's done, so then I was fine with it. It was fascinating. So possibly the Karbanot will be the same thing. Also, what I would say most probably is that along with the restoration of any sacrificial service, we'd also have to have a renewed appreciation for it, for the spirituality that is in it. Okay? However, this question came up in the 1800s, right? Well before our return to our ancestral land in Israel and to be back in the vicinity of the temple grounds, I should say, not the temple now. The temple was destroyed by the Romans, but the temple grounds where all of this took place. But there was debate amongst some of the leading rabbis there about the feasibility, right? In the 1800s, Jews were starting to return back home to the land of Israel. And therefore, it came up amongst these rabbinic leaders, how about reinstating the karbanot, the sacrifices? And there was a Rav Tzvi Hirsch Kalisher in a sefer called Drishat Tzion, who strongly urged the Jews of his time to pursue offering certain karbanot. And as we go through some of the issues, we'll understand why it was only certain karbanot that he was encouraging, and there were others amongst, including the Chasam Sofer and others who debated this. And Rabbi Chaim Jachter from New Jersey, who oversees our Eruv, who was here as a scholar in residence a while ago. So he had a fantastic article, which I am basing this on, where he discusses the different halachic Jewish law issues that come up with our reinstating carbonate, and that's what I would like to go through. So let's begin with source number 1, and we'll see where that leads us. The pasuk says in Shmot, in the book of Exodus, Tivi'emo, Betita'emo bahar nachalatecha, you will bring them and plant them in your own mountain. Machon l'shivtecha, pa'alta Hashem, the place you made to dwell in, Hashem. Mikdash Hashem konenu yadecha, the sanctuary, O my Lord, which your hands established. This we say every morning as part of our daily tefillah. It's part of the Az Yashir, the song of the sea that Moses, and the children of Israel sang after the splitting of the sea as we were leaving Egypt. So right away, the question is, do we need to have this Beit HaMikdash or not? Right? Can we offer this with the... So the question would be in regard to rebuilding the Beit HaMikdash. So this verse, this pasuk seems to indicate that we will not be doing the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash. Rather, Mikdash Hashem konenu yadecha, the sanctuary, right? Konenu yadecha, your hands established it. And Tosfot discusses this in the second source only in Hebrew. I'll translate for you. Kamosha Pirish, like Rashi explained, right? That a banui, they're talking about over there, when the Beit HaMikdash will be rebuilt, and when can it be? Can it be done at night? Can it be done in different days? And he says that's only banui, binyan banui b'nei adam. That's when we are the ones who are going to be building it. Aval mikdash ha'atid, but the future Beit HaMikdash, the third temple, banui u'mushuchlal yigalev yavo min hashamayim. That will be all outfitted and will come literally down from the heavens, as it says, as we say, Mikdash Hashem konenu yadecha, the Mikdash Hashem that your hands have established. Okay, therefore, that seems to indicate that we're not going to be building the Beit HaMikdash. Now, the picture that I sent out in the email is from the Temple Institute. Temple Institute is a large institute that's there in the old city, actually overlooking the Kotel area. And there they are preparing for the Bayit Shlishi, for the third temple. And they have different vessels that have been made already. They have garments for the Kohanim that already have been made. And their approach is, we don't know exactly how it's going to come about, but in case we're supposed to be doing it, we are ready on the right and preparing. And actually, there was a beautiful Tisha B'Av video that I think I sent it around. I'm not sure, but it was going around, and Rabbi Berman from the OU in Israel was visiting different places in Israel where they are doing different preparations. He visited a bakery where the person has learned how to make the lechem hapanim, the special 12 loaves that were baked and in a very, very particular way. So he's working on making those lechem hapanim that we should be ready when the time comes. There's a group of over 100 women who are working on weaving the parochet. The parochet is the curtain that hangs between the Holy of Holies and the Holy. So we are going ahead and taking the steps that we can do, right?
Who is in charge of this?
I'm sorry?
Who is in charge of this?
There is. I don't think there's any one central organization. I think these are all personal initiatives that people are making. There's a whole farm that they are working on breeding para adumas, the red heifers, which will come up later on. The need for red heifers. Yes.
Is the braiding different than what we're used to at Rosh Hashanah, where it's around and the other?
Oh, wait. So the challahs are not braided. The lechem hapanim are not braided. When you have a chance, take one of the Art Scroll Chumashim and look it up in the Parsha of Truma. You'll see it was like a box. It had a base, came up on either side, right? And then it came over in and somehow retained the integrity of that shape. Yeah, we had it in Menachos, Steve. Yeah.
I was going to ask when there are multiple opinions about how it was. How did they decide which?
Yeah, they're going with one of them. They're going with one of them.
Is the presumption that Eliyahu becomes he will tell us the first correct?
Well, I think that's a safe assumption. But once again, right, we do what we can do, right? In other words, the famous teaching in Ethics of the Fathers, Lo alecha ha-malacha ligmor. It's not upon you to complete everything. But that doesn't give you a pass to not start and to not do as much as you can do. Yes, Dove. I don't know, like a UFO, right? It will be identified. UFO is unidentified. This will identify, right? But yeah, okay. So that seems to be that opinion. Rambam, on the other hand, the Rambam, Maimonides in Laws of Kings 11:1, he says, Hebrew and English, you have that there. Hamelach HaMashiach, the Messianic King, Atid la'amod la'achsil malchut David liyashna. When Shalav Yishna, he will restore the dynasty of King David. Ubone HaMikdash, and he will build the temple. Umekabetz nidche Yisroel, and he will gather the scattered, the dispersed of Israel. And then all of in his days, all the observance, all the statutes will return. And we will have the Shemitah year in full sense, the Yovel year. So according to the Rambam, right, it seems to be clear that it's for us to do. And before, in other words, it's not that we're waiting for the Mashiach to come to do it, the Messiah to come to do it, because that's one of the ways that this person will prove their mettle as actually being the Mashiach, as actually being the Messiah that he will build that Beit HaMikdash, right? So was it supposed, right? So should they have seized the initiative? Right? Should we have seized the initiative, if not in the 1800s, but should we have seized the initiative in 1967, right? When we regained control of our Temple Mount, right? Should we have? Should we not have? Right? So again, there are different views, as you could well imagine, and there are different sources. Rav Soloveitchik would bring the source from Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy 12:10-11. It says there, Hashem speaking via Moshe, Yarden, when you will cross the Jordan and settle in the land that Hashem your God has given to you, and Hashem will grant you safety from all your enemies around you. V'yishavtem betach, and you will live in security. Then that place that Hashem has chosen for His name to dwell there, Shamataviyu, there you will bring all the offerings that I have commanded you, right? And then, right, all that which you will pledge to give to Hashem. So, according to this pasuk in Devarim, right, it seems that only once we are settled securely, safely from all our enemies around us, right? That was not the case in the mid-1800s. That was not the case in 1947. That was not the case in 1948, not the case in 1967, nor is that the case now. When I offer my personal tefillah every morning, hello, Ken, and happy birthday, Mr. Ken. So when I offer my personal tefillah, I ask Hashem to safeguard and to give strength and victory to those who are defending our land, whether they are in the Gaza area, whether they are in the Yehuda Shomron area, whether they are in Lebanon, whether they are in Syria, wherever they might be. We're certainly not at a point now where we are secure from the enemies that surround us. So that would imply that we're not meant to go ahead and do this. On the other hand, the Ramban, Nachmanides, right? He writes as follows. I have it in English. I say, by way of explanation, the bottom of the first side, that Israel was punished because of the delay in the building of the sanctuary, since the ark went from tent to tent as a stranger in the land. And none of the tribes bestirred themselves to say, let us seek God and build a house to his name, just as it is written, even until his habitation shall you seek, and thither shalt thou come. Right? L'shichno tidrashu uvata shama is the Hebrew. Right? You should seek out his habitation and come there. And this continued until David, King David, was roused to action in this matter. After many years and a long period of time had elapsed since he had become king, as it is said, and it came to pass when the king dwelt in his house, and the Eternal had given him rest from all his enemies around about, the king said unto Nathan the prophet, see now, I dwell in a house of cedar, but the ark of God dwells within curtains. Now Ramban continues, God blessed be he, prevented David from building the sanctuary because he said, for thou hast shed much blood upon the earth in my sight. And thus the building was further delayed until the reign of his son Solomon. But had Israel really desired this matter and really wanted to build the sanctuary, and had they bestirred themselves to action from the start, it would have been done already in the days of one of the judges, or in the days of Saul, or even earlier in the days of David. For had the tribes of Israel aroused themselves in this matter, he, David, would not have been considered the builder. Israel would have been the builders, and the fact that David had been involved in wars would not have been a problem, would not have disqualified him in any way. So the Ramban seems to be saying very clearly that even though it was the time of Judges, there were many battles going along, that we need not have waited, and we were wrong. It was sinful for us to have waited, but we should have seized the initiative. Yeah, Steve.
Possibly the Barim is talking about the building of the first building. Can we infer the conditions of how it's supposed to be doing the third one?
Perhaps that's what the Ramban is thinking. Perhaps, right? No, but the Ramban is talking about the first temple, right? He said maybe there's something about the first temple. The Ramban is also talking about the first temple.
How he answered the possible
Yeah.
Barim and why we
Yeah.
necessarily apply the possible Barim to the
Yeah.
current
Yeah. So maybe some view that as being messianic. That's when the final temple will be rebuilt. But until then, we need to do all that we can do to try to bring it about.
Does this temple have anything to do with the Mashiach coming at that synchronicity at the same time?
So again, Rambam Maimonides says that one of the signs that a person is truly the Mashiach will be his rebuilding or overseeing the rebuilding of the third temple. That will need to usher them. Yes, Janet.
The Ramban, maybe, so thank you for the new portion of lesson, but when wasn't the command that it should be at Shiloh, but that wasn't the final place, didn't Bnei Yisroel, but they didn't know that it was Yerushalayim each time. So how could they build if they were told, rest this here at Shiloh, but it's not where the place actually ultimately where I'll choose to place.
So the pasuk says you'll come to the menucha and to the nachala. You'll come to the resting place, and you'll come to the heritage, to the portion. And Shiloh was the temporary place, right? And it was not built as a Beit HaMikdash. And then it became clear to David that Jerusalem was the proper place.
Right, but was that revealed during the period of the judges?
So maybe you're making a good point. Mm-hmm. It could very well be the Ramban is saying that David wanted to do it, and it was revealed to David. Had there been those who had really truly wanted it and pushed for it beforehand, there were other prophets at the time, then it might have been revealed to other prophets at that time. But we were not pushing for it. Ramban says that was the mistake.
Maybe because we didn't have the information. It's like, which is first?
So according to Ramban, it seems the desire is what leads to the information being granted. Yes, doctor.
Yes. What about people who shop Kippuris before Yom Kippur. They take the chicken, put it around their head 3 times.
That's not a
All the
sacrifice.
evil
That's
things they did
right.
are
right.
put into the chicken.
Right. That's not a sacrifice. That's not a sacrifice. Yeah. Yeah. Some people do that. I personally use money and give that to tzedakah, give that to charity. Yeah. That's
Yeah, the police don't come.
that works better for me. Okay. Now, one other thing here, another topic, which I don't have here in the notes, and that is that we are all in a state of tumah, of impurity. Okay, meaning once a person has been to a cemetery, has been in contact with death, so to speak, so that brings on a certain degree of tumah, and that can only be changed with the whole process of the red heifer, which we don't have today. So therefore, we're all in a state of impurity today. I mentioned before, there's a farm in Israel that they are breeding. They received some red heifers. A whole story, amazing story. I'm trying to remember the details. That there's a farm somewhere in Texas where they were having red heifers, right? The problem is that the government comes and tags all the animals, right? And that tag in the ear is already considered to be a blemish, all right? That would render it disqualified for use as an ultimate red heifer in the time of the temple. And there were people from Israel who contacted this rancher, and this rancher was a devout Christian, and he was so excited about the opportunity that his ranch could help the Jews with their red heifer. And he said to them, "And you're in luck. Why? Because this was during COVID, and therefore the government had not come around, so those animals had not been branded, and not had their ears pierced with that identification tab. So he was able to send them to Israel. All right, and now they are in Israel. All right, and that will come up again at the very end when there's some other concerns. So if we're all in a state of impurity, ritual impurity, then how can we even discuss bringing any sacrifices? So that's what I said before, that Rav Hirsch Kalischer was talking about bringing some sacrifices, meaning there are some communal sacrifices where we say Tuma Duchuya B'tzibur, that in a situation where people, where the community is in a ritually impure state and unable to go through the ritual purification process, then it is brought even in that state of impurity. Another problem that we run into is, who are the ones who offer these sacrifices in the temple? The Kohanim, the priests. Who is a priest? Right? So we have certain chazaka, right? You know, the famous joke, Rabbi, I want to become a Kohen, a priest. I can't make you a priest. Come back. Rabbi, I want to become a priest. Rabbi, right, fine. Why do you want to become a priest? My father was a priest. My grandfather was a priest. I want to be a Kohen. Right? Obviously, if your father was a Kohen, then you are a Kohen. So we have what's called a chazaka, right? That as far as we know, generation to generation, this has been a family of priests, and those who have the surname of Cohen typically are priests. Katz is a shorthand for Kohen Tzedek, right? They are priests. Azulai is a family lineage of priests. My neighbors in Israel were the Judaikans, which actually comes from Yedei Kohen, which means the hands of a Kohen. So that's also a priest family. So we have many people that we assume that they are Kohanim, right? And they have the family tradition that they are Kohanim, and they'll get the first Aliyah every time. They'll give us the priestly blessing on the days that we do that. However, we don't know for sure that they are Kohanim, evidenced by the fact that when a person's doing a lot of baking, you take off some challah, you take off a part of the dough that's meant to go to the Kohanim as a gift to them. We burn it. We don't give it to the Kohanim. Why? Because once it's separated as this challah, it can only be eaten by a Kohen. And the Kohanim now, they're tamei. And do we really know the person is a Kohen? So how do we deal with identifying who the Kohanim are in a definitive manner? Yes, Asha.
What about the DNA? They probably kept all the same.
Okay, DNA is limited. DNA, right? So there is the Kohen gene that they have identified, right? And that's passed down patrilineally, right? Right? Because that's how Kohen gets passed down, father to son, father to son, father to son. The problem with that is, let's say the father, the Kohen, married a divorcee, right? That's not going to affect the DNA of his son, but his son is not a Kohen, right? So DNA cannot be a conclusive way of determining. It might be conclusive in terms of determining that he comes from a lineage of Kohanim, but we don't know if anything went awry over the generations, and therefore we have no way to conclusively know that this person is in fact an eligible Kohen. Okay?
But that points out that we have to wait for Mashiach.
Okay, so let's take a look in the Rambam on side 2 of the sheet. Once again, Rambam, Maimonides, laws of relations, right? Kol Kohanim is manazeh, the chazakah hem Kohanim. Whoever claims to be a Kohen today, right? The assumption is that he is a Kohen. Ve'ein ochlin el b'kadshei hagvul. However, when it comes to their eating the sanctified food that only Kohanim could eat, so they could only eat that which is they could only eat right? They could only eat from the kachim v'hushatia truma shel divrayim. Only those things that, based on Torah law, are not obligated in this tithing, in this truma, but rabbinically they said you should take off. So that which has the status of rabbinic truma, they're allowed to eat. But that which has aval truma shel Torah, but truma of the Torah, something that has Torah status of being truma, the challah, or from the dough, the challah that was separated, that is of Torah level, ein ochelota. The only one who can eat that is a Kohen miyuchas, is a Kohen who has yichus. Yichus is clearly defined lineage, right? And in the time of the Second Temple, Kohanim would come with their Sefer Yichusin, with their documents of their lineage. And that's how they would be able to do it. So it would seem, according to this Rambam, that we're running into a brick wall when it comes to who is truly a Kohen. Would a Kohen be able to do it? Rav Kalisher, right, in his Sefer for the 1800s, his response to that is, if we have a reason to doubt the authenticity of a Kohen's lineage, then it will need to be proven. But if we have no reason to doubt the authenticity, so then that will not be an issue. Then we can go with what we call the chazaka. This person has an established status of being a Kohen, so we're able to go with that. Another point that's made by the Chatam Sofer is, in the Second Temple, they only allowed Kohen priests who had that clear lineage document to serve, because we had what to choose from. There were those who had the lineage documents, those who just had the tradition, family tradition. So of the two, we'll choose the ones who have the family tradition plus the documentation to support it. But in a situation today where no one has this documentation, the shtar yichusin of tracing themselves all the way back to Aharon HaKohen, to Aaron the Kohen, right? The Kohen. So there we would not demand and insist on that which we don't have and can't have. So there we would work with the yichus. Johnny, want to say something before?
No.
Okay.
Well,
Yes.
yes. So 2 things. For the part that's not rabbinically allowed, that's Torah level. So just like the challah, would other, like when these Kohanim practice or whatever, so do they, even if it was a feast offering, do they burn it completely like an olah? I mean, what happens to those
Wait.
parts?
We're talking nowadays when we don't have the sacrificial service.
I understand, but you said all these places like the Institute are practicing and doing it.
They're making vessels, they're making garments, they're not offering sacrifices.
I thought they don't do the.
They're prepping everything.
I thought
They're prepping.
Okay, I thought they were also learning how to.
They might be learning how, but they're not actually doing it.
Okay. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Though actually in this video, there is a place where they've built a model, full-size model of the altar as it was in the temple, and Kohanim come there and practice, and they get a certificate, right, for their knowledge that when the time comes, we'll have people who know what to do. But once again, even if they'll be shechting an animal and then eating, in this case, they're not shechting it they're not slaughtering it as a korban, as a sacrifice.
Right,
so it will not have any of those restrictions and all those laws that pertain particularly to sacrifice.
okay, so they're not separating certain just to be extra careful.
Correct.
And then.
Yes.
How was this reported when they were like on a birth certificate or on the ketubah? How was this reported before the Torah was given to them by Moses? Then
So Kohen began with the Torah.
okay, so that's when it started.
That's when Kahuna actually began. Yeah, and the sacrifices. Yeah. Yes, doctor.
If somebody comes to you and say, he's not Jewish, but he tells you that he did some sort of thing and he has a DNA of being Jewish, and also he's a Kohen, and he's willing to convert. Can he still become a Kohen?
No. A convert, right, becomes a commoner like myself, becomes a Yisroel, does not become a Kohen. Kohen is, right, even if he is a descendant of Aaron the Kohen, right? However, if he's non-Jewish, that means that at some point the mother was not Jewish. So that's going to that's certainly going to break the chain of kahuna. Yeah. So that would not work. It's very funny. There was one time a person here, right, who came, and it was an African American, but the end of the person was not Jewish, but he was presenting himself as being Jewish. So the Rabbi asked them, can I give you an aliyah? And the guy said, yes, and I'm a Kohen. And he gave him Kohen aliyah. I'm like, what? that did not, we can have an African American Kohen if, right, there are African Americans, well, not African Americans, there are Negroes, right, who are Jewish going back generation after generation, right? Certainly the Ethiopians, right? But this individual is not from that group. So I'm not saying that a person who's black for all time could very well be a Kohen. Yeah. Yeah.
He came in and asked me and said converting. So he went to a couple of synagogues and he took some courses, I guess. Then he said, I'm a Kohen. Then eventually, after like a few months, he gave up. He said it's too hard.
It is hard.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you don't have the established bona fides, then are you relegated to the Levine tasks, like the music and the?
That's for Levium, not for Kohanim. So.
So you're this Kohen without the this established with
That's where everyone is right now. That's where everyone is right now. No one has
If the
that.
temple's rebuilt, then you're in limbo.
Well, when temples are rebuilt, we'll have to figure out what to do, right? Yeah, we'll have to figure out what we're going to do. Okay, another issue is Kohanim. Even if we establish who a Kohen is, he can only do the service while he is wearing the special priestly garments. Okay, so the Temple Institute is making those priestly garments. Okay, however, it's not so simple, meaning no one is putting those garments on right now. Why is that? Well, in Deuteronomy 22, 11, 12, the pasuk says, Lo tilbos shatnis, serma pishtim yachtav. Right? One of the chukim of the Torah, chok is a mitzvah that we don't, that the reason behind it was not shared with us, that we don't wear a garment that's woven from wool and linen. So whenever I buy a new suit, I send it to the shatnis lab in Los Angeles, and they check to make sure. Typically, we buy wool suits today, right? And if it's not a wool linen mix, you might think nothing to worry about, right? So it's 100% wool. The only problem is there is the, what's it called? There, they put around the collar and the shoulders, right? There is the, sorry? Padding. Yeah, I guess some sort of padding. They have a fancy word for it. That goes in those areas. There's also all the stitching that goes in. Facing, padding, right? There's also all the stitching that goes in. So that needs to be checked, right? Because the threads come from old garments that get thrown in and get all shredded, then turned into thread, right? So who knows where the threading came from? Okay, so we're not allowed to wear shatnez. Now, I'm sorry.
Is there certification?
There are some suits. I know in Israel. So there's a company called Bagir, and those suits come checked. Right? In other words, on the suit itself, on the lapel on the inside there, it says, 100% wool, blah, 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 size this, and naki michshash shatnez, clean of any concern of shatnez. Here in America, I don't think. Now, there are certain suits where they'll say, oh, there's never shatnez there. That's what the guy will tell you in certain stores in LA where they sell to a religious clientele. But when I spoke to someone who's well-versed in shatnez, he said he can't fully rely on that. Yeah.
So, this week has been full of like new things. So it seems to me the sewing thread is actually separate. It's not an interwoven fiber. So.
Yeah, but it's certainly woven into your suit.
Okay.
Right? It's certainly woven into your suit.
It still stays distinct because you could pull that thread out.
Do
a seam ripper and throw it out.
Yes and no.
Pull it out.
Right. Whether you can pull it out or not, if it's sewn in, it's sewn in. It's part of the garment. Okay. So now, right next to where the Torah tells us not to wear shatnez, it then says, that's verse 11. In verse 12, it speaks about the four-cornered garment that we wear, the tzitzit garment, the talit garment that we wear. And we learn out from there that the talit garment can have shatnez in it. I'm sorry, can. Talit. We're not at the garments of the Kohanim yet. It can have.
Where does it say that? I don't remember.
The juxtaposition of those two verses. Don't wear shatnez. Make tassel on the four corners of your garment. Now, a garment when the Torah says garment, it means wool or linen. And the tassels you're putting on need to have techelet. What is techelet? Techelet is wool that's dyed blue.
Right.
So the Torah is telling you on your garment, which means either wool or linen, you need to affix these strings which have wool. Therefore, you see, you have wool going onto your linen garment. But if a person, now our taletim don't have that. We don't want to go there because it's only a mitzvah by day, not a mitzvah by night. If you're wearing it by day, you're good. You're wearing it at night, it's a problem. So we don't go there. However, the garments of the Kohen and the belt that the Kohen would wear, that explicitly has in it wool and linen. It explicitly has in it wool and linen. So if I make the garments without, therefore, the Kohen wearing it, right? If he's not doing proper avoda, right, then it's a problem that he's wearing a prohibited garment, right? So it's containing shotness over here, right? And therefore, right, if the big day kahuna, if the garments are not being made properly, then it's like wearing this talit at night, where a person is transgressing the issue of shotness. So therefore, that's another issue that came up. One last issue that we'll deal with is the positioning of the altar. Once again, we go to Maimonides. Rambam Laws of the Beit HaMikdash, 6:15, and then we'll see 2:1. We'll go straight to the English. Therefore, we may offer all the sacrifices in the temple site, even the temple itself is not built. Similarly, sacrifice of the most holy order can be eaten in the entire area of the courtyard, even though it is in ruin and not surrounded by a divider. We may also eat sacrifice of lesser sanctity and the second tithe throughout Jerusalem, even though it is not surrounded by a wall. For through its original consecration, it was consecrated for that time and for eternity. The Gemara says, Kedusha Rishona Kitsha L'Shata V'Kitsha L'Atid Lavo. The sanctification that took place with David's building of the temple, that remains for all time. Which is why when you go to Israel and you're in Jerusalem and you go to the Kotel, to the Western Wall area, and there's a ramp that leads you up onto the Temple Mount area, there'll be a sign there saying that the chief rabbinate, right, prohibits going up onto that area. There are religious people who do go up onto the area. The reason that they prohibit it is because certain areas are the area of the courtyard, and the Kiddush, the holiness of that, has remained, and therefore in a ritually impure state, we're not allowed to go there. Therefore, they say don't go up at all. The religious people who do go up there, they say that they understand that this area might be, we stay away. This area is definitely not, and therefore they don't go there. But the Kedusha remains. That's of the general site. How about the altar? Yes, Steve.
I don't understand what the Rambam's saying, but he's saying about leaving Karban. How are you going to do the shechita if there's no Beit HaMikdash?
So at the time of the second temple, they started bringing the sacrifices, even though there was not, right? You don't have the walls. You'll need an altar. Let's see the next thing, right? The altar, right? Rambam Beit HaMikdash 2:1. The altar is to be constructed in a very precise location, which may never be changed. As it is said, this is the altar for the burnt offerings of Israel. Isaac was prepared as a sacrifice, the binding of Isaac. That was on the temple's future site. As it said in Genesis, go to the land of Moriah. And in Chronicles it is said, then Solomon began to build the house of the Lord in Jerusalem on Mount Moriah, where Hashem appeared to David his father in the place that David had prepared, and the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite, Ornan HaYevusi. So therefore there needs to be a very, very specific place, location of the altar in order to bring it. Do we know that exact location? Some say, well, we have a tractate of midot, of measurements, which tells us exactly where each thing was located. So therefore, perhaps we can identify the exact location of the altar. The problem with that is we know exactly how many amot. Amot is a cube, is a measurement, right? We call it cubits. What do we call that? Cubits. I think a cubit in English. I don't know what a cubit is, but it's an amma in Hebrew. The only problem is there are different opinions in how big an amma is, right? Ranging from, some say it's about 1.5 feet, others say it's 2 feet, right? So you might know how many amot there are, right? But exactly how big by our terms is an amma? So having the measurements from the tractate of measurements, it will let you know how many amot, but it won't give you the exact location. Before we get to Rav Kook, another issue that comes up is how is this going to right? Some say, what, we're going to go offer a sacrifice in the shadow of the dome of the rock, right? Right? That is a disgrace to the korbanot, right? So therefore, another issue that came up, which again I saw this on the video, that the video about all the things being done, in preparation of the temple. So the red heifers. So Hamas, their name should be obliterated. Hamas gave one of the reasons for their attack and for kidnapping and killing babies was that we heard the Jews are preparing a red heifer, right? And therefore, right, we had to go and defend the honor, right? So we can imagine, right, just recently, right, there was this incredible law in Israel, which said that Jews are not allowed to pray on the Temple Mount, right? Now, you want to say Jews are not able to gather as a group and pray together on the Temple Mount? Okay, I can understand that. The same way that we wouldn't have a Muslim group, right, having a whole service down by the Kotel, or you wouldn't have a Christian group, right, coming down by the Kotel, having a big, having mass over there by the Kotel. But individuals, a Christian wants to pray there, a Muslim wants to pray there, an atheist who's confused and wants to pray there, right? That's perfectly fine, right? Actually, Solomon, when he built the temple, he said, "Ki beiti beit tefillah yikarei l'chol ha'amim." This house will be considered a house of prayer for all humanity, right? But there was a law that we're not allowed to pray there. Meaning, if they would see you, moving your lips in prayer, so then the police would come over, right? And which to me that was a ridiculous, right? But that's not the case anymore. Okay, that was there so as to not offend the Muslim sensibilities there. Okay. However, I think we would all agree that we start offering sacrifices on the Temple Mount, right? That would offend sensibilities and would probably lead to warfare, or certainly lead to a certain degree of violence, right? And there's no source that says that we should be risking our lives in order to build the Beit HaMikdash. Okay. So at this point in our lives, in our history, where we still have to be worried about the Muslim sensibilities, right, it might not be the best idea. But let me conclude with a quote from Rav Kook. The force that sustains the soul of the Jewish people is its incredible yearning to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash and to restore its glory to its perfect state. Only this yearning has uplifted the spirit of all the generations to know that there is a lofty purpose to their lives and their historical continuity. That we are simply a link in this chain that began with Abraham and Sarah, and worked its way through Egypt, Mount Sinai, to our return to Israel, the building of the temple, right, to where we are today in this long chain of historical continuity. We are each a link in this chain. In this lofty point is hidden the lifeblood of the connection of the Jewish people, that the Jewish people have to the land of Israel, Eretz Yisroel. All of the mitzvot that are contingent upon the land of Israel, to whatever extent they apply, preserve the vitality of this fundamental dew of life. So even though we do not have this temple and we're not able to be bringing sacrifices, and we probably at this point don't fully appreciate the spirituality of this sacrificial service. Nevertheless, an essential part of who we are, an essential part of our davening, of our daily prayers, and certainly on the holidays and on Shabbat, on Sabbath, is our hope and prayer. Every single Amidah, silent prayer that we have, ends off, right? Sheyibana Beit HaMikdash, may the temple be built speedily in our
And
days.
the offering of Judah and Jerusalem.
Yes,
And
correct.
also the other one, the prayer for Israel and
Yes, right. It is
Fire
replete
offerings.
with all of these hopes. So even though we don't have it, and halachically there are many issues that will be holding us back at this time, but our ratzon, our want, our desire, our thirst for it, that is what has kept us going, and that is what we must keep on fanning as we are living through these historic times, which we hope will become the culmination of a long historical journey. Okay, my friends, we'll call it over here. Yes,
I
Janet.
get that, but it doesn't completely resonate because the covenantal promises to the land. So the fact that later Hashem says the place that Hashem will choose, the lifeblood seems to be the land and not merely the Beit HaMikdash, because the covenantal.
And all that goes along with it.
So it doesn't.
And all that
this
goes along with
Rav
it.
Kook, it doesn't resonate completely for me.
Mitzvah contingent upon Eretz Yisrael. Right? Certainly the temple is is the beating heart of that. Yes, Steve.
When Rav Kook uses the phrase to restore its glory to its perfect state, I always struggle with that because I sometimes feel that we romanticize. The Nevi'im certainly describe periods of the Beit HaMikdash being built and the Kohanim being in a
Correct.
terrible state.
So the perfect state is what we're talking about in the future, in the Messianic
It says
times.
restore to a perfect state. It sounds like it's
I hear.
sort
Yeah, but
of
bigger and better than before. Yes.
And then
So there were periods when it was perfected, and then